always been one of the most mysterious and enigmatic lands in the world, and it is precisely these qualities that attract many people to explore and discover it. There are tales of living Buddhas in Tibet, or young children just 3 to 4 years old who naturally know and see about their past lives. Or lamas who meditate on snow until it melts, or the Tibetan people living alongside saints with supernatural powers, with every Tibetan chanting and reciting mantras until deities manifest. Each story evokes in our minds imaginations of Tibet as a fairyland from ancient tales. Perhaps we are no strangers to this figure. He is the 14th Dalai Lama, a religious leader of the Tibetan people. However, due to political disagreements, he is currently living in exile in India. According to Professor Eric Shaw from the University of Sydney in Australia, among the saints of the 20th century, there were 3 Asian figures, namely the poet Rabindranath Tagore, the Indian national hero Mahatma Gandhi, and the 14th Dalai Lama. Near the earth, far from the sky. In Tibet, when a high-ranking lama passes away, their position is taken over by someone identified as their reincarnation. This tradition is deeply ingrained in the spirit and culture of the. However, the Chinese government is currently attempting to intervene by installing a lama friendly to the government to replace the 14th Dalai Lama. This has inadvertently sparked a struggle to determine the successor to the Dalai Lama. Let's explore it together in today. Please subscribe to the Whispers of the Weird channel to watch fascinating videos. Basic aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism is a form of Buddhism practiced in the Tibet Autonomous Region, Nepal, Bhutan. Additionally, regions like Ladakh, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh in India also have significant numbers of followers. Other areas such as Central Asia, Xinjiang, and Inner Mongolia have smaller numbers of followers. The development of Tibetan Buddhism has unique characteristics that perhaps no other country in the world possesses. According to historical records, Buddhist scriptures in Sanskrit from Nepal and India were first translated into Tibetan during the reign of King Songtsen Gampo, who founded the Tibetan Empire. Songtsen Gampo is traditionally credited with introducing Buddhism to Tibet, evidenced by his marriage in 641 to Princess Wencheng from the Tang dynasty of China under Emperor Taizong. Records indicate that this princess was intelligent and a devout Buddhist. Additionally, the king had another wife from the Nepalese Licchavi dynasty named Bhrikuti, who was also a sincere Buddhist. As they were both devoted to Buddhism, they advised the king to send people to India and China to invite Buddhist monks to Tibet to spread the Dharma, and also dispatched a delegation to India to study Buddhist. After their studies, these individuals returned and created a unique script for Tibetan based on Sanskrit to translate Buddhist scriptures into Tibetan. Thus, it can be said that Buddhism was introduced to Tibet around the 7th century. By the 8th century, Buddhism had truly gained dominance in this land. Although Songtsen Gampo's successors were less enthusiastic about promoting Buddhism, during the reign of King Trisong Detsen, he recognized Buddhism as the official religion of the Tibetan Empire. This king also invited Indian Buddhist scholars to his court to teach the Dharma and translate Buddhist scriptures. From the 11th to the 13th centuries, during the period of fragmentation in Tibet, Buddhism strongly influenced inner Asian peoples, especially the Mongols. Tibetan Buddhism may have been translated to Mongolia through the Tangates of the Western. Later, when the Mongols were about to incorporate Tibet under the Yuan dynasty, such as Indian Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism, flourished. During this period, Tibetan Buddhism was practiced not only in the capital Beijing and the Tibetan plateau, but also throughout the country. For example, Hangzhou, the former capital of the southern Song and the largest city in the southern Song, became an important center for Tibetan Buddhist activities. Similarly, at Wutai Mountain in present-day Shaanxi province, a sacred site for Chinese Buddhist pilgrims. It was also heavily influenced by Tibetan Buddhism. Later, during the Northern Yuan period, the rule of Late Din Khan marked the deep penetration of Tibetan Buddhism into Mongolian society. Within nearly 50 years, almost all Mongols had become Buddhists, including tens of thousands of others, all following the Gelug school and loyal to the Dalai Lama. Since then, Tibetan Buddhism has played a very important role for the Mongols. When Mongolia was under Qing rule, Tibetan Buddhism remained important for many Khanates. such as the Sangar Khanate and the Koshit Khanate. Additionally, Tibetan Buddhism was revered by the Manchu court because the Manchus were heavily influenced by Mongols and Tibetans. Some historians even suggest that the transmission of Tibetan Buddhism to the Mongols by Tibetans and Manchus could be seen as an intentional conspiracy to weaken their military strength. However, others have refuted this theory. Currently, there are many sects in Tibet, but the most common are the four main sects, including the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Gelug sects. Each sect has different methods of practice and follows different tantric scriptures. Among them, the Gelug sect, also known as the Yellow Hat sect, is the most widespread because it has a religious leader with the title of Dalai Lama. So who is the Dalai Lama? Dalai Lama is the title given by the Tibetan people to the foremost spiritual leader of the Gelug sect in Tibetan Buddhism. Dalai. While in Tibetan, the Dalai Lama is also understood as the precious conqueror. In Buddhist countries in Central Asia, for a long time, it was believed that Avalokiteshvara, a bodhisattva of compassion, has a special relationship with the Tibetan people, being linked to their fate by reincarnating as rulers or benevolent religious leaders such as the Dalai Lamas. According to the Khadan text, the main scripture of the Khadan sect, the Dalai Lamas are identified as incarnations. This text also records the theory of the bodhisattva's incarnations as Tibetan great figures, such as King Songtsen Gampo and later Master Drataba. As we mentioned above, the Gelug sect is the most popular sect in Tibetan Buddhism. This sect was founded around the 13th century by a scholar named Tsongkhapa. Tsongkhapa and his disciples established major monasteries in Tibet, such as Yangon Monastery in 1409, Drepung Monastery in 1416, and Sera Monastery in 1419. These are also considered the three great monasteries of the Gelug. In 1419, when Tsongkhapa passed away, his three disciples, Galtsabsha, Kedrupsha, and Gendon Drub, significantly advanced the Gelug sect. Along with these three, other disciples also built many monasteries for spreading the teachings across Tibet. Among them, Gendon Drub, known as Gendon Drub, is believed to have founded the Shilhunpo Monastery. Later, in 1578, he and his successor, Gendon Gyatso, were posthumously awarded the title of Dalai Lama. And in the Tibetan consciousness, these two are respectively revered as the first and second Dalai Lamas. By 1578, Sonam Gyatso, also known as Sonam Gyatso, was invited by Altan Khan to Mongolia to spread Buddhism. Dalai. And Sonam Gyatso also became the first Dalai Lama of Tibet, but this view is largely rejected by Tibetans. Not long after, the third Dalai Lama accepted Yonten Gyatso, the descendant of Altan Khan from the line of Kublai Khan, into Tibetan Buddhism. This close connection led the Mongols to enthusiastically support the Gelug sect, thereby strengthening their position, but also sparking fierce opposition from rivals. Later, Yonten Gyatso, also known as Yonten Gyatso, still became the fourth Dalai Lama of Tibet. However, he died under unclear circumstances at just 27 years old. After the death of the fourth Dalai Lama, a war among sects in Tibet erupted. During this time, the Sangha dynasty, supporters of the Karma Kagyu sect, began the search for the Dalai Lama's reincarnation. However, this continued secretly, and through negotiations between the Panchen Lama and the Sangpa court, the ban was lifted. At this point, Nawam Lobsang Gyatso, or Lobsang Gyatso, became the fifth Dalai Lama. He also became the first Lama to wield both spiritual and political power over all of Tibet. Therefore, this fifth Lama is called the Great Fifth by Tibetans. With both divine and secular authority, Lobsang Gyatso is credited with unifying all of Tibet under the Ganden Photrak government. After a period of Mongol military intervention, and ending a long era of civil war, as an independent head of state, he established relations with the Qing dynasty and other countries in the region, and also met the first European explorers. To date, the title of Dalai Lama has been passed down through 14 generations, and the current spiritual leader of the Tibetan people is the Tenzin Gyatso, also known by the name Tenzin Gyatso. He was enthroned on February 22, 1940, in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, and officially became the political and religious leader for millions at that time. Typically, when a high-ranking Lama passes away, the position is assumed by someone identified as the reincarnation of that Lama, a tradition deeply ingrained in the spirit and culture of Tibetan.
However, now that Tibet has become one of China's 5 autonomous regions, and due to persistent dangers there,
the Beijing government seeks to intervene in finding the next Lama to unify and prevent rebellion.
This is not merely a succession battle but has clear political elements.
Many experts believe that to control Tibet, China has entered the spiritual realm. In 1951, when China was about to annex Tibet, the then supreme leader of China, Mao Zedong, met the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso.
At that time, Mao told the Lama that religion is poison.
Since that statement, China plunged into a great cultural revolution. Tibet at that time could not avoid being devastated. Before the revolution ended, statistics show approximately 6,000 Tibetan monasteries and nunneries were destroyed, along with the stripping of robes for most monks and nuns here. Furthermore, thousands of tons of ancient Tibetan cultural artifacts, accounting for 3/4 of the total artifacts preserved at sites across the country, were destroyed, looted, or used as recycling materials. This caused resentment, and the Chinese Communist Party and atheism advocates often mock religions, then seek to bind Tibet to China by suppressing local culture and historical traditions, while prohibiting the practice of Tibetan Buddhism. In addition, they forced the 14th Dalai Lama and many people into exile. Perhaps for the current Chinese government, this Lama is no different from a threat in their eyes, as evidenced by the mainland calling him a separatist or a wolf in monk's clothing, while mocking his followers as the Dalai Lama clique.
Many believe that threat has been exaggerated, because since 1970, the 14th Dalai Lama has not called for Tibetan independence.
Instead, he has requested genuine autonomy for this region within the framework of the Chinese constitution. Since 2011, he has also transferred all his political and administrative responsibilities to a democratically elected.
However, China's concerns are not unfounded, as although the Beijing government currently controls Tibet, most people here still look to their leader.
Recently, on July 6, the 14th Dalai Lama turned 89, and at some point, the question of his successor will arise.
It seems Chinese officials have never been as interested in the sacred Tibetan reincarnation tradition as now, also known as Tulku.
This tradition stipulates that a young Lama of Tibetan Buddhism will inherit the religious and political responsibilities of his predecessor after the The process of identifying the reincarnated Lama follows guidelines left by the predecessor and is carried out by profound Buddhist scholars. Typically, the selection of the successor is also personally chosen by the predecessor. Over the past 8 centuries, many reincarnated Lamas have been found across the Tibetan Plateau, as well as in other Buddhist regions of the highlands like Bhutan, India, and Nepal. Even Lamas have been found in other areas such as Mongolia and other parts of Russia. From 1959 to 1990, the Chinese government did not allow Tibetans to select new Lamas in most lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. It was only in 1990, after the 14th Dalai Lama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989, that the Chinese government sought to restore religious institutions
such as the Tulku tradition, with the aim of balancing the increasing popularity of this Lama.
The introduction of reincarnation regulations in 1995, for which the Chinese government calculated to intervene in the selection of the 11th Panchen Lama, and more recent efforts by the Beijing government, such as invoking regulations from the Qing dynasty era, and emphasizing historical continuity, are only to bring this tradition under government management.
However, to date, scholars have not been able to find any regulation from the late Qing period that cites government appointment and recognition of reincarnated Lamas.
Hence, the absence of a decree supposedly foundational to the management law of the entire Tibet not only arouses curiosity but also, this absence is even more surprising considering the reputation of Chinese archivists, especially during the Qing dynasty, for meticulously preserving vast amounts of records. Due to the lack of clear regulations, many researchers believe that China's desire to intervene in the appointment and recognition of reincarnated Lamas is essentially to firmly control Tibet. Because the people here may not know who the leader of the People's Republic of China is, but they know very well about their Dalai Lama. Thus, if the Beijing government can control this leader, it will surely win the hearts of the Tibetan people, and then this mysterious land will be an inseparable part of China. Since 2007, the Chinese government has officially affirmed its rights over spiritual matters and declared that the Tulku system can only operate with state approval. Traditional precedents are insufficient for the selection process of reincarnated lamas, and now everything must comply with. Therefore, the leadership has issued a national decree through the Religious Affairs Bureau. This decree formalizes a set of reincarnation rules previously announced by the Tibet Autonomous Region in 1995. Although outwardly an atheist state through such laws, the Beijing government continues to interfere in the religious life of the people. However, China's intervention in the selection of Tibetan reincarnated lamas has largely been unsuccessful and often leads to widespread unease in the local community. We can take the example of the 11th Panchen Lama, the second most famous lama in Tibetan Buddhism. In 1995, when he was just 5 years old, the Dalai Lama confirmed him as the reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama. That same year, the Chinese government expelled this boy from Tibet, then installed another boy, their own choice, as the 11th Panchen Lama. China's intervention in the reincarnation system has also paved the way for many that, according to Chinese law, all reincarnated lamas must register with the government, which has turned a sacred religious activity into a bureaucratic and easily abused process. In 2016, Khyentse Gyatso, a prominent Tibetan scholar and senior member of the Chinese Communist Party, accused bribery and corruption as rampant among Chinese officials involved in recognizing reincarnated lamas. From 2007 to 2017, under the guise of religion, the number of registered lamas increased fourfold, from about 300. This political intervention by China has cast a shadow of instability and suspicion over Tibet's ancient tradition.
Along with bureaucratizing Tibetan cultural and spiritual activities, China also relies on distorting history to affirm its legitimacy in intervening in Tibetan religious matters. In 2021, an article by Global Times falsely claimed that all previous Dalai Lamas were born in China. Even assuming Tibet has always been part of China, certainly not all Dalai Lamas were born in what is recognized as Tibet. As we just mentioned above, the fourth Dalai Lama, Yonten Gyatso, was an ethnic Mongol born in Mongolia, while the sixth Dalai Lama, Sangyang Gyatso, was a Monpa ethnic from the region of Arunachal Pradesh in today's India. Additionally, the Chinese government inaccurately claimed that in 1653 during the Qing dynasty, Emperor Shunji bestowed the title of Dalai Lama upon religious leaders in Tibet. But in reality, the title Dalai is a Mongolian word meaning ocean, bestowed upon Yonten Gyatso by the Mongolian Khan Altan. According to Tibetan tradition, discussing the reincarnation of this action is considered lacking in tact and respect, as if the community is eagerly awaiting the death of the Lama. However, the party showing the deepest interest in the future incarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama but it is certain that the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan community will not be indifferent to the profound impact of his death and rebirth on Tibet. Although China continuously slanders the Dalai Lama and bans the display of related publications, they are now attempting to command his reincarnation process. In 2011, the 14th Dalai Lama made his clearest statement about his reincarnation and firmly rejected China's interference. The 14th Lama also declared he would leave clear written instructions to be carried out by the Dalai Lama's private office. He clearly stated that only the individual preparing to reincarnate has the authority to determine the location, method of rebirth, and how that rebirth. At the same time, when he passes away in exile, his reincarnated manifestation will be born outside China.
This is clearly a condemnation of the Chinese government's efforts to interfere in the Tibetan Buddhist reincarnation. Also in 2011, the Dalai Lama specified that he would clarify succession. But all efforts would be in vain, as the Chinese government might reject any succession choice made by Tibetan Buddhists in the Dalai Lama's office.
From here, the Tibetan people in general and Buddhist followers in particular will face two choices.
One is to look towards the 15th Dalai Lama religious leader. Although there has been no new information today, the future event of the Dalai Lama's reincarnation will certainly become a major,
and that is the information about the battle to determine the successor to the Dalai Lama. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Hello and see you again in the next videos.